The 856th time we were all going to be dead, lying in the grave, holding, I don't know, equable daisies. Bananas. They're not giving us enough bananas. I don't care for that.
What's funny about nuking the economy of a country that we're friends with and increasing tariffs because he didn't like the tone?
Has Trump really produced the greatest economy ever? He certainly seems to think so.
I think we have the greatest economy actually ever in history. We broke 50 and we broke 7,000. They said I wouldn't do that for 4 years, and I did it in 1 year. We have to get the word out, okay? If we can get the word out, we should win.
Now, he's boasting here about the stock market, which has recently hit record highs. And that's good news, not just for Wall Street, but also for the 62% of Americans who have retirement accounts or own stocks. There's a lot more to the economy than just the stock market. And a January Fox News poll, yes, Fox News, found that only 24% of Americans believe they're better off economically than they were when Trump took office. Meanwhile, 39% say they're worse off. Those are pretty brutal numbers. To be clear, the rate of inflation is still relatively low, as it was by the time Biden left office, but Trump repeatedly, explicitly promised that prices would go down, not just increase at a slower rate if he became president again, and that has not happened. That said, the economic growth numbers under President Trump so far have been pretty strong, and the doomsday recession that many people warned about after his haphazard tariff rollout never materialized. And inflation-adjusted wages are slightly up since Trump took office. Basically, the economy is doing fine. Not amazing, but fine. This means that Democrat doomsday warnings are probably going to fall flat with the public, but so will delusionally optimistic claims from the Trump administration. Of course, that's just my take, and the debate is really only just beginning. Joining me now to discuss all of this, we have the liberal YouTuber Adam Mockler and the conservative pundit and Daily Signal writer Tony Kinnett. Let's get into it. All right, guys, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Always good to be with you, Brad.
So, Adam, I'll come to you first. Did you know we were living in the greatest economy to ever exist in all of human history?
A++++, baby. But, okay, in all seriousness, I think the way that Trump and his administration speak about the economy is fundamentally incongruent with how most Americans are experiencing the economy. Consumer sentiment is at the lowest point in over a decade. I mean, for a really specific number that blew my mind regarding the jobs report that just came out yesterday, the U.S. economy added 181,000 jobs in all of 2025. In Biden's last month, he created more than that. In Biden's last month, he created 237,000 jobs. Trump couldn't even recreate that with the rest of 2025. So since taking office, Donald Trump has said we are in a golden age, or we're in an A+++ economy. When he was on the campaign, he made the promise, and I'm quoting him verbatim, on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again to bring down the prices of all goods. Well, since then, we've seen tariffs impose a 1,000% tax on the average American family, according to a new study that just came out.
You mean the $1,000, not 1,000%.
Sorry, what did I say? $1,000. Lord have mercy. Yeah, $1,000 tax. I'm using the Trump percentages over here now. And then it's supposed to be a $1,300 tax in 2026, according to Trump's average rate of 13.5% tariffs. That, combined with the fact that millions of Americans are losing access to healthcare, or at least their premiums are skyrocketing, combined with the fact that unemployment is up. It's 4.3%, which is higher than it was when Trump took office. I think the administration's remarks about the economy are incongruent with how the average American experiences it. I don't think we're in a recession or hanging on or close to a recession. The economy is in a decent, stable position. We're not about to fall off a cliff, but I don't think it's doing well. I don't think Trump has made it better. Most macroeconomic indicators show that his tariffs aren't really helping with manufacturing investment. One more thing, we've lost 70,000 manufacturing jobs since April of 2025. So I just don't. Yeah.
Tony, so I guess I wonder, like I said in my opening monologue, I don't think the economy is abysmal or falling apart either. But is Trump not setting himself up for failure? I mean, that Fox News poll, for example, most people don't believe what he's saying, and he's making such extremely optimistic claims. Is that not setting himself up for failure? And what do you make of the economy under Trump so far versus Biden?
So he's setting it up for sure. But the question is, we don't yet actually know whether it's for success or failure. I heard again from kind of the populist wing of the right that, the rivers were going to be flowing with milk and honey, and it was going to be solid gold bars jutting out of trees. Manufacturing was going to be building factories right in everyone's backyard. My backyard, maybe it's going to be a Honda plant yesterday, today a Ford plant. Who knows? That's what I was told. The left told me that we were all going to be dead by now. Like the 856th time we were all going to be dead, lying in the grave, holding, equable daisies. And neither of those things has come true. What has come out of it is two things. Number one, Donald Trump getting out there going, tariffs are my favorite word. I love tariffs. And used in two ways. One way that works, one way that doesn't. And now the Supreme Court's deciding whether or not that's going to be useful. The other thing that's come out in the Trump economy is a massive amount of deregulation, which has done a lot to increase, for example, manufacturing in the United States. Again, we do have a lot of ground being broken. Some continued on, saved plans, for example, some of the Taiwanese chip manufacturing plans that were likely to be scrapped, at least from some of the upper executive comments. I believe that was to The Economist in February of 26, February of 25. Trump administration helping get some of Biden's latter projects across the finish line, encouraging some manufactured investment, promises IOUs. We'll find out. In essence, I think the economy's fine, but they've set themselves up in a gamble. If we get through tax season, as we've seen in midterms, after Q2 is really in a midterm year when the economy sets voters' opinion up for the election cycle. And given the tax breaks that are expected, given the brackets, the way that they're set, it's likely to increase sentiment. So either this is a let him cook and he succeeds, or let him cook and he brings out a burnt loaf of banana bread. And again, that comes with the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court strikes down his tariffs, I think the economy is going to slingshot forward like an aggressive rubber band.
I want to push back on one specific
Sure,
point,
go
if
ahead.
that's cool. So I think that when Trump's tariffs are being touted by this administration and the quote unquote money that he's brought in, I think what he's doing is hurting the average American, the average consumer, the average small business. It's all at the expense of these people. And in return, we are not getting any long-term guaranteed investments. There's the continuity argument that I really, really like. When you're trying to get certain companies to invest in your country, they need to know that there is a long-term return over a decade or over 2 decades. If I were to concede that these companies, that Trump's tariffs are getting these companies in, this is like me conceding that point hypothetically, right? That these companies are going to come in, you need some sort of long-term agreement to make sure that they're satisfying their investments. But when Trump is ruling via executive order, there is no continuity between administrations. I would argue a lot of these countries or a lot of these companies will just try to run out the clock until the next administration and hope that
some of them will, certainly,
and hope that it's not as aggressive or the posture isn't as aggressive. So what we're doing is, again,
Apple would be a good example.
And I think Mark Zuckerberg, even one time, he was on camera leaning over and he was like, did I throw out the right number there? Like he threw out a number.
Zuck is totally playing that game.
So,
100%.
So they're all like playing these games where there's a massive amount of investment in these tariffs. A lot of them are playing these games without any long-term commitment or ability to actually make sure this manifests. So there's no continuity if the next administration can just undo the executive order. So we're seeing American families struggle. They're paying an extra $1,000. We're seeing that small businesses can't hire as much. Part of the reason unemployment is up since Trump took office is because tariffs are strangling small businesses. And what is this for? No long-term actual investment into the United States that is continuous.
So, in Brad, is that all right if I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome, cool. So first of all, yeah, you're right. Some of the companies are playing games to see kind of how serious this is. As kind of in pushback to the concept of each administration flipping things, there has been a historical precedent in the United States to leave prior contracts that are established under previous administrations, especially in manufacturing, shipping, other import-export, international business groups, to leave those alone. Again, I mentioned at the beginning that the Trump administration came in and tried to help some of Biden's last projects across the finish line. That's a known thing. Obama did some of those with Bush. Trump 1 did that with Obama's team. And Biden did some of that, carrying through some of Trump's last, I believe, projects with one of the medical manufacturers. It might have been Eli Lilly. I don't quote me on that one. I don't have that one written down, but Eli Lilly's in Indianapolis. I believe that might be the company. If not, then probably AstraZeneca. So there's kind of a history of that. However, on gaming, as far as manufacturing investment, and then the tax on American people. So the Trump administration is using tariffs in two different ways. One of them works, one of them doesn't. So the way that some of the tariffs are working is as an international negotiation tactic. You can negotiate in one of three ways. Either through the stressing of certain diplomatic treaties, and trying to flex borders on those. Number two, through personal financial aid projects, the USAID personal bribery piggy bank, right, as John F. Kennedy called it, or last but certainly not least, the military as a negotiation tactic. So the Trump administration has utilized tariffs as a strong arm tactic in like short-term economic rusel, which is when you're talking about national security goods, for example, like steel, maybe some parts of automotive. I will have to see how SCOTUS rules on it. It has worked in the past in some areas. The long-term tariffs, like tariffing bananas and things, no, I don't believe in the tariff deficit situation like that. Again, put Peter Navarro, put Howard Lutnick in a room somewhere else. Let Scott Bessent, I would say, do things more. But some companies have eaten the costs, which I was told they weren't going to. They have actually invested a lot more into the country for us. We've talked about automotive manufacturers, but also, again, Walmart, Amazon, Costco, Home Depot, Apple, Nike, General Motors, Procter & Gamble's larger conglomerate have tried to eat some of the costs on the tariffs in a cooperational strategy with the Trump administration. And a lot of prices have gone down where some have gone up. Again, I think that SCOTUS ruling on how much the president can do without Congress here, Brad knows I hate national emergency disease.
I think they're going to strike down almost all of his tariffs because he built them on such a flimsy constitutional basis.
He's certainly weakened I hate, Brad knows this, Adam, I hate that an executive can just declare a national emergency whenever he wants. Yeah. It has been the downfall of every republic ever. I hate it. And the idea of declaring a national emergency and going, bananas, they're not giving us enough bananas. I don't care for that. And I don't think SCOTUS will too. But steel...
But Trump set up the situation where he says, well, the Supreme Court can't strike down my tariffs because it will cause an economic global catastrophe because we've built everything up around these tariffs. And it's well,
I think
they'd actually, international markets would probably be happy.
I don't even think he believes
down,
that.
But
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Brad. But I think
go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
I don't even want to concede that this is working and bringing manufacturing back into the United States. I have a few statistics here. Since April of 2025, we've lost 70,000 manufacturing jobs.
Yep.
I also have the Federal Reserve Economic Data, FRED. They have a statistic called real private fixed investment into non-residential structures with manufacturing. So it's how much manufacturing is being invested in the non-residential structures. You can look this up. It is tanked since Trump took office. Over the past year, it is down. In fact, it looks like it was just skyrocketing during Biden. People were genuinely investing money into the U.S. economy. One more time, real private fixed investment, non-residential from FRED. You can look at this chart. So
Fred.stlouisfed.org is where you can find
it's
that.
The Federal Reserve. Yeah. Can you point to me an economic indicator that shows manufacturing investment increasing? I
mean, yes, I can provide. It'll take me a second to pull up this particular list, but there are a number of manufacturing organizations that are reshoring some kinds of investment into the United States. I point again here to local
into the
Indiana.
Actual
hang on for a second here, because the kinds of investment that are returning aren't really going to make the populace happy in the end. And they're not really going to make kind of more of the socialist side of the left. The Bernie Sanders is not really going to be thrilled about it either, because a lot of it's going to be automated manufacturing, a ton of it, because we are now moving into an era where automated manufacturing is becoming a much bigger realm of the field. It's become realized, because otherwise you have to rely, as a lot of jobs moving overseas have found, basically relying on slave labor practices as we've seen in communist China. So in this particular context, there have been a lot of automotive manufacturers, a lot of semiconductor manufacturers that have started operating, going through the permit process, going through the investment, purchasing materials from various countries and places, not places, what I'm looking for here, building cooperatives around the world to provide certain levels of resources. Is why you hear Trump talking about country of origin for particular building resources all the time. And those investments are coming into the country. Now, as to whether or not they're going to produce a bunch of 1950s on the Detroit auto line style manufacturing, no, that era is not coming back. It's just not.
So is it a national security goal?
Say again?
Is it a national security goal then to reshore our supply chains so we strengthen them? Or I thought this was to benefit.
So his office would likely. That's not always differentiated here. I would say that in this case, first of all, he would argue it as a national security goal. I would say that it's a long-term investment shoring to both weaken counterparts around the world and also reshore American industry. That is long-term.
We illustrated that many of these companies and countries are playing games, and you were unable to illustrate any actual indicator.
The companies that I listed I believe, I can kind of scroll back up here and look. I don't believe that Walmart, Amazon, Costco, Home Depot, Apple, Nike, General Motors, the exception here, and then Procter & Gamble aren't heavy manufacturers, they're distributors.
Okay, how is this manifesting into helping American citizens? I want to put America first. When Trump said that he wants prices to be lower and Americans to be stronger in their pocketbook, I believed him. I want that to happen. You're saying that you're saying that tariffs might not actually do that. So what's happening here?
So what I'm saying, again, regarding the president, first of all, two kinds of tariffs. When the president is talking about reshoring auto manufacturing and other things, he's arguing national security, as in if there were some type of an upheaval, some type of a global political conflict, right, then manufacturing those in the country here, national security issue, obviously in that sense, in that time, building up the levees around New Orleans may not see any, use today, but if a storm comes, hey, then it's useful. That would be useful for the Americans in that particular situation. That's what he's arguing. As for the manufacturing economy, just because there are fewer total manufacturing jobs in a Honda facility built in southern Indiana, that doesn't mean that there still aren't manufacturing jobs that are created here. And of those companies that are building more, Stellantis, Honda, Mercedes, Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, General Motors, Volkswagen, and Scout Motors. I always forget that Scout Motors is becoming a thing. And then BMW expanding both the amount of hiring and facility expansion in the next 2 years at their South Carolina facility. So now, is that enough for me to maybe justify a ton of tariffs over a long-term period, the other side of tariffs? I'm not sold on it right now. I'm honest to goodness with both of you. I'm in a position where I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see what happens through Q2 because both sides have been wrong.
To be candid, if the national security argument were the one that this administration were repeatedly making, I would find
to the Supreme Court, that is.
To the Supreme Court, but they've said a lot of things to the public. I would actually find that convincing. Listen, if there were surgically placed targets against other countries and industries in order to reshore manufacturing in such a way that protects our supply chains in the case of a war or a virus, I'm actually for that.
Medical manufacturing is a great example.
We did not.
I'm agreeing with you.
We did not see surgical targeting, though. Like, there was a clip a few days ago of Trump talking about a call he had with the Switzerland president. Have you guys seen this clip?
Yeah, the one where he 39 instead of 30. Okay, I thought that was really funny.
They can. It's funny, but not really. We had free trade.
It's really funny.
We had free trade with Switzerland before this. What's funny about nuking the economy of a country that we're friends with and increasing tariffs because he didn't like the tone? Also, it's incongruent with your argument that this is due to national security reasons when Trump is placing tariffs because he doesn't like the tone. I can't remember. Did he place tariffs due to the Nobel Peace Prize or just threaten tariffs? I can't remember.
To answer your question specifically here, and I do want to address it, me finding things funny doesn't mean that I'm saying that I fully endorse policy. Me finding the idea that another country's leader calls ours, no matter who they be, whether, again, during the Biden administration, when you had the Russian blustering against the United States, I said, I don't think that Biden should be pushed around by absolutely anybody. And at the one moment when he told the guy in charge of Belarus at the time, essentially to F off on a hot mic, I said that was awesome. I loved it. I was thrilled to see it. And when Trump did the same thing in the Middle East, said, I don't think they know what the F they're doing. I was for that. As far as another country's leader, Switzerland in its banking system and manipulating other countries and charging exorbitant rates and not allowing certain countries access to it for financial investigation, I think it's absolutely appropriate the president of the United States leverages that in a tariff situation.
You're doing it again.
And it was not a completely...
Argument. That's not why he did it.
It's linked. Again, what I said at the beginning.
That's not the argument he made. He literally said it's because she said.
It is. Here's what I said at the beginning was that there are two kinds of tariffs. There are tariffs in manner of negotiation, and then there are broad spectrum trade deficit tariffs. If Trump is using the tariffs as essentially the way that presidents were supposed to use USAID, or again, more Teddy Rooseveltian, use the military, okay, you're getting something for Americans out of this. You can explain how good. But if it's a long-term, the bananas in Madagascar situation, I don't care for that. But as far as the Swiss, leader calling the president and then blustering and him going, well, you think you're so great? What if we raise him a little more? I mean, I think there's an element of that that's funny because the idea that you're going to bully the American president into doing something, I think, is ridiculous.
You can find it funny, but how does this help? How does ripping up free trade agreements with countries, like we had one with South Korea as well. It was titled Chorus that Obama had negotiated. Trump ripped that up, and I'm pretty sure we have a higher tariff rate against South Korea than we had before he took office. We have a higher tariff rate against Switzerland than before he took office. You're making arguments really quickly. You're making arguments that are incongruent with the Trump admin. So you're saying something about the Swiss banks and how there is a rational reason to do this.
I suggested that there is one facet of the United States States
We
agreement
can have a
regarding
conversation
Switzerland,
about
yes.
national security and Swiss banks, but that's not the conversation Trump is having. He literally it was Fox News or something, said that it was because of a phone call. He got pissed off because of a phone call. He's gotten pissed off through the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a pattern with this guy.
Tony,
I don't
think
believe that this is national.
there's often an attempt from more serious conservative thinkers like yourself and like people in your spaces to attempt to backfill rationales to Trump doing stuff that's actually just motivated by him being crazy and his personal benefit, like his personal inclination. And so you talk about the two types of tariffs. I'm wondering if you're willing to acknowledge a third type of tariff or a third type of tariff exception, which is just favoritism and corruption. I mean, I'm hearing from long-time MAGA influencers, right, that the way to get and people, journalists in conservative media, the way to get your tariff exemption is to buy a lot of different Trump coins or to donate to certain funds and everything.
Yeah, getting a ticket to some kind of Trump event or anything like that.
And I just feel like instead of draining the swamp, particularly in Trump 2, not so much in Trump 1, but in Trump 2.0, instead of draining the swamp, we've fed it fertilizer and let it grow and multiply exponentially.
So I absolutely would concede that there are a couple of cases in which there are muddied waters regarding whether or not you can hear me out before you give me the pundit grimace. There are a couple of cases that we have in which individuals appear to have donated a large sum of money and then have received a knockoff on certain tariff situations. I would absolutely concede that there are cases of favoritism in that particular manner. I would also suggest along those lines that no, I don't particularly appreciate that. As far as an arduous corruption scandal and things of that particular nature, some of those things have already been investigated and found that they fell through. They didn't even play out fully as they were originally suggested. So as far as backfilling arguments, though, again, I will reiterate, I can find something funny while disagreeing with the decision at large. I can find something humorous.
I don't care if you find it
I can find something, to be rather hilarious, even if I disagree with the approach. Again, back to the case with Biden. I appreciated him telling the Belarusian leader at the time to F off, while at the same time
This is different.
thinking that Biden was a complete idiot in how he handled that entire situation. So
we are kind of running up on time.
Can I
do want to
say
ask
one more thing?
Yeah, briefly. Then I have a follow up for you, Adam.
Oh, just very quickly. Tony said that there are a couple cases of the waters being muddied in regards to corruption. I just wrote that down. A couple cases of the waters being muddied. It is way more than a couple cases. He has pardoned the former president of Honduras who bragged about trafficking kilos of cocaine into the United States. He pardoned the former founder of Binance.
This was regard to the tariff conversation, right? We're talking about tariffs rate changing because of bribery.
I thought we were talking about overall corruption in the administration. I mean, if we're just talking about the
Bradley
tariff,
was talking about, you said there are
about
cases in which we're
tariff
talking
Okay,
about
my
tariffs.
bad.
If you're going to list he released the former president of Honduras and then the tariff rate, suddenly dropped.
Then there are
I'd
more than
have a couple of questions
let me
there.
revise. There are still more than a couple cases of the waters being muddied in regards to Donald Trump placing high tariffs on other countries. He placed tariffs on countries in order to affect their political elections. He was trying to get people pardoned. Was it Bolsonaro that he placed? I can't remember. He placed
Trump
a tariff.
told somebody on the mic, as soon as my next election, I'll have more leverage to give you whatever you want, and then gave Russia whatever they wanted, let's say with Crimea, I would absolutely be just as upset with Trump as I was with Obama, 100%.
I mean, okay, really quickly, I apologize for misinterpreting the tariff piece a minute ago, but I still think that it's not just a couple cases of the waters being muddied. I still think it's
understand
larger
what
than
you're
that.
saying.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can relitigate the Obama Russia policy now.
If we are comparing the actions of presidents and being presidential, we're going to pretend that somehow history started in 2016. I think that's really disingenuous.
Well, I think he's different. He behaves himself quite differently than presidents that came before.
Especially Obama.
But I do want to ask you, Adam, because I feel gaslit by the Trump MAGA, economic, everything is amazing, prices are going down, and they're literally not. Well, okay, we'll fire the BLS commissioner because the statistician must be the problem. What I wonder, though, is are you, and not you particularly because you weren't involved, but can Democrats take some accountability for the fact that they gaslit us for years under Biden? They told us inflation was transitory. They told us that inflation was Putin's price hike. That was something Jen Psaki said over and over again, even though the inflation rate was already highly elevated before Putin invaded Russia. They told us so many different things that just turned out to not be true. Biden's sharp as a tack right? Hasn't lost a step. That's just his stutter. So it's
Don't
like
you question Biden?
as much as I would agree with a lot of the criticisms that Democrats have made about Trump, I feel like sometimes they feel like, oh, well, we just get to turn over a new leaf now, and like the last 4 years never happened, and we don't have to answer for any of it because look at this big lie Trump is telling. But like, I'm still salty and mad about a lot of that, and I think a lot of Americans are still resentful about that.
In order to rebuild trust with the American people, it is a necessity for the Democratic Party to take accountability for multiple things throughout Biden's era, even beyond the age cover-up that happened, even beyond the failure at the border that they asked people to ignore. The economic rhetoric used by the administration, Biden's administration, trying to gaslight people was not cool. And of course, the lib in me is going to argue Trump is doing that 10 times worse, but just keeping it contained to Biden, yeah, I think that we do need to take accountability. I think that Democrats overall need to have a more affirmative message about what we want. That's not us being unified in opposition to Trumpism or whatever Trump is doing on any given day. I am going to continue my work to help. One of my goals is to continue to work on democratic messaging, talk to politicians, and push us in a direction where we can take accountability, take ownership, and move on towards a better era. I didn't have a huge part in the 2024 election. I was still kind of growing, so I didn't do like a lot. I didn't do a lot of the Biden-type gaslighting. I was kind of just making my entrance in, but the Democratic Party needs to regain trust with the American people, and that's not going to be done by ignoring the mistakes that we made. It's bothersome.
All right, guys. Well, we will leave it there for now. Thank you both so much for joining me, and we'll talk again soon.